A lot of people talk about strategy and they say, it's a plan, it's a way for organizations to figure out what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Mhm.
What's your viewpoint?
Yeah, I have several answers to that. First, if you look at my definition of strategy, also the definition that I use in the Strategy Handbook, which was my first book,
Hmm.
it's an organization's unique way of sustainable value creation. So I look at how does an organization create value for a select group of customers. So what are the products and services? How are they different? How are they unique? And how do you do that in a way that is sustainable over time? And sustainable meaning from, let's say, from a strategy economic perspective, make sure that your competitors don't outperform you, but also from a, let's say, more from a climate and a social perspective. So the entire word sustainable. So that's one way of looking. That's the definition.
I'm very lucky to partner with Bernie Maloney from Powered by Teams today to talk to Jeroen Kranjenbrink, who's an accomplished strategy and leadership expert. He provides leaders stability, concreteness, and value in strategy planning and execution through a human centric approach. He's also a speaker and author of various books on strategy and consulting. His book, The Strategic Leadership Playbook, was rated one of the best books in 2022 on LinkedIn for management, leadership, and strategy tools. Jeroen and his partner created a company, Strategy Inc., to help leaders improve how strategy is done across the world.
A lot of people talk about strategy and they say, it's a plan, it's a way for organizations to figure out what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Mhm.
What's your viewpoint?
Yeah, I have several answers to that. First, if you look at my definition of strategy, also the definition that I use in the Strategy Handbook, which was my first book,
Hmm.
it's an organization's unique way of sustainable value creation. So I look at how does an organization create value for a select group of customers. So what are the products and services? How are they different? How are they unique? And how do you do that in a way that is sustainable over time? And sustainable meaning from, let's say, from a strategy economic perspective, make sure that your competitors don't outperform you, but also from a, let's say, more from a climate and a social perspective. So the entire word sustainable. So that's one way of looking. That's the definition. But if you look at the nature of strategy, and that's what I've been focusing on the last couple of years, really strategy as a competency. I
Hmm.
think what we have seen for probably a century or so, strategy really focusing on the content of strategy with lots of room for many consultants and consultancy companies to flourish because somehow most organizations do not have the competence to develop and implement strategies. And hence we see these huge failure rates of 50, 60, 70, 80%, whatever the research you're looking at, but quite astonishing high failure rates. So for me, strategy needs to be an organization's core competency. So the ability to identify opportunities, kind of seize them and turn them into business and do that on a continuous basis at every level in an organization. So it's much more a business process and organizational competence than anything else, I would say.
One of the things that I read was this thing called the 1 hour strategy. This is interesting because we think about strategy. It's global. It's a lot of things that you need to do. And when I heard this 1 hour strategy, like how is it different from traditional strategy approaches?
I would think it's very different because traditionally strategy is a boardroom exercise
Hmm.
or something for the top of the organization. And there's even definitions of strategy saying that what the top of the organization does, which I think is a nonsense definition. But traditionally, it's for a select group of people that, and also traditionally, it's this kind of odd thing. It's something that you do irregularly. You do it off-site, so you move somewhere else. You have a couple of days, and it's kind of special. It's exceptional, and the whole idea and the 1 hour strategy book. It's a short book. It's a
Hmm.
storytelling, like sharing a new idea of what strategy could also look like, and it's different in two ways. One is that it is something for everyone. So the 1 hour. So this is the spoiler alert. The 1 hour rule refers to the idea that as an executive level, you need to spend 1 hour per day. at the kind of mid-level, 1 hour per week, and at the lower level, or if you the non-leadership positions, 1 hour per month. So the idea is everyone in the organization needs to spend time on strategy, not just boardroom, not just top. So that's quite a radical difference. And the second difference is what I outlined, the idea I outlined in that book is it should be a normal, kind of almost mundane process. It's not something exceptional. You don't need to go to a hotel or a resort and do some team building exercises and make it special. No, this should be a regular, every day, every week, every month, a continuous business process throughout the organization. And because that is so far off what we
Hmm.
see in most organizations around the globe, I started with this book just sharing the idea and showing some simple way of how this could work to make sure that people can even imagine the idea that it can be very different from the traditional approach.
Working in different organizations, what I've found is people actually are not that great at strategy, and they do go to hotels and they spend a lot of time. And especially as the organization grows, and I've worked for very large organizations, strategy becomes more thinner and thinner, and it's like you really don't see a direction. The teams, the employees are not in a position to see what's going on. What advice do you have for such folks?
That's a very big question because the difference that I just sketched between the traditional approach and how I think strategy should be done is quite radical, from top down to all over the organization, from exceptional to a normal business process. So there's a couple of things you need to focus on. This is not just simple tips. That it's too big of a transition to have just simple tips. One is you need kind of the tools to do this. Like if you want people to work on that strategy at every level, and you also want to make sure this is coherent and consistent and aligned, you need one and the same tool or a few tool set that you can use across the organization. And I know for managing performance, there are such tools like OKRs, OGSM, and so on and so forth. For strategy development, there are not really such tools. So
Right.
one of the simple tools in the book is what I call the 6M model, decomposing strategy into its core elements: means, magic, market, meaning, money, momentum. And if you like, we can go into depth later on. But it's a simple template where everyone at their level can think about strategy at their level. So if you are just have your own work, you can think about the strategy for your job. If you're leading a team, you can think about the strategy for your team. Same for business unit, division, department, and the entire organization. So you need the tools, also the technology, because to really do this, you do need some software and probably AI to really make it work. So that's the tool technology side. And the second, let's focus on three elements. The second element is governance, the way the organization works. Because if you say strategy is everyone's job, that's quite a radical thing to say, because it also means that people need to have the time, the freedom, the responsibility, the accountability to actually think about their strategy and work on that, even if it's just 1 hour per month. So it's quite a change in how you lead your organization, how the organization works, and the governance structure, and so on. And third, competence. Uh, you started the question with kind of saying not many organizations are great at strategy,
Yeah.
and that's because not many people are great at strategy. Because where do you learn it? It's of course there's strategy courses in every MBA program. I've taught those as well. But then after such a course, can you really do this? Do you have the competencies? Because they focus not on competencies but on tools, on SWOT, on five forces. So once you understand the tool, you're supposed to be able to do strategy, which is not the case. So competence development, and that's why with our company we focus so much on helping individuals at every level develop the competencies that you need in order to strategize for your work, whether it's a leadership position or not.
That kind of gets into some thoughts that I have where work through the industrial era really was about separating the doing from the thinking, and strategy has been reserved at the executive level, which then chokes off entire teams. So I love the fact that you're presenting this as a skill that can be learned. What sort of steps do organizations need to take to really bring those strategic competencies, those skills, out of the executive suite and more broadly across the organization?
Yeah, of course. One, and that's not so much, I think, the task for the organization, the executive, but more my task is kind of define what are these skills, because it's easy to talk about strategic skills, but what does that mean? And if you look in what's around, most of them focus on strategic thinking. So still on the thinking part, not on the doing part. So that's why we have what we call a big five of strategy framework, outlining really not just the thinking, but also the doing competency. So that's on my side. But then I think there's three things organizations need to look at. One is assess. So basically identify which competencies are there, which are not, who has the right competencies, who has not yet, what are people's strengths, what are their weaknesses. So like any other competency assessment that's out there, assess your strategic competencies, because that's the starting point. Know what you're already good at, and know the competencies you still need to develop. Second, a logical follow-up would be develop. So develop the competencies through training, through learning. There's of course many ways of doing that. Part of it is teaching, like you do at the university. There's self-learning, use of AI, the coaching. There's all kind of ways to help people develop those competencies. And third, bet that in their work, because I've seen so many assessments. So you do the assessment, that's nice, but then what? Same for trainings. You do a training, and after the training, if you're lucky, like 10% is retains, but mostly it was fun, it was interesting, but we moved back to work.
Yeah.
So if you fundamentally want to improve an organization's strategic competence, you need to embed it in the processes, in people's job descriptions, in their annual meetings they have. So really embed it in the way of working to make sure that it is part of their work. So those are the three, I think, if you look at the big picture, how can you make this work? What you need to do as an organization.
Ever felt like your product backlog was overflowing? Stakeholders were pulling you in different directions. And the development team was skeptical about this thing called Scrum and Agile. Here's the thing: market conditions changing all the time, technology is changing all the time, and customer needs are changing all the time. Companies don't just need product owners and scrum masters who create specs or run meetings. They need visionaries who understand customer value, focus on outcomes instead of outputs, and can guide teams to deliver it rapidly and consistently. The question is, how do you become that product owner or scrum master? This is where I like to introduce you to Concepts and Beyond's Scrum Alliance certification courses. It really transforms the approach to product management and agile. Concepts and Beyond delivers Scrum Alliance certification courses that grow the Scrum Master and product owner. These courses are about mastering the mindset that deliver product innovation and team performance. What makes these courses different? Instead of theoretical lectures, we use brain science principles to make learning stick. Our trainers focus on practical skills you can apply in your next sprint. Imagine coming back to work with the confidence to prioritize your backlogs effectively, the skills to collaborate with developers meaningfully, and the know how to deliver products that customers actually love. The product owner journey starts with the CSPO, which is a 101 level course that has no prerequisite. If you have work experience, I would suggest taking the ACSPO course to become a practitioner. If you like to advance beyond that, take the CSPPO course that focuses on you becoming a master practitioner. The Scrum Master journey starts with the CSM, which is again a 101 level course that has no prerequisites. If you have work experience, I would highly recommend you take the ACSM to become a practitioner. And if you like to advance beyond that, take the Certified Scrum Professional Scrum Master, CSPSM, that focuses you on becoming a master practitioner. And if you're a leader leading your team and your organizations, then consider taking the Certified Agile Leadership Workshop. This class prepares you to manage the dramatic change we have been experiencing and lead yourself, your team, and your organization effectively. Here's what you get: interactive sessions using innovation games that unlock product creativity, real world scenarios that mirror your daily product challenges, practical tools for backlog management and stakeholder communication, and a supportive community of product professionals and Scrum professionals. Our trainers become your guides on your side, in your agile journey. The best part, our in person and virtual courses fit into your busy schedule with cohort style learning that gives you time to practice between sessions. Visit conceptsandbeyond.com or scan this QR code and discover how your certification courses can transform your approach to product management and agile adoption. You mentioned this 6M framework, and is that the competency, or is that the mission, market, money, model, methods, mindset? Can you walk us through one of them? How would you explain that to an organization? How would an organization take that and then develop that?
Yeah, for me, the difference, the 6M model is not about competencies, but that's like the content of strategy. So that's what you need to understand what strategy is about. That's more learning, not so much a competence, but more the content. Where market is about your customers and your competition, means is about your resources and about the partners you work with. Money is about the costs versus the revenues. Meaning, it's not my mission, but meaning it's kind of the goals and values you have as an organization, but also the culture. So what do you stand for? And then in the middle of the framework, there's magic, which is kind of the linking pin between everything else, which is the products and services an organization creates, because you need your competencies to develop them, and you need a market where they fulfill a need. And then finally is what I call momentum, is kind of the environment. So what's happening, what are the trends, the uncertainties, and are they helping you or are they hurting you? So that's the content of strategy. If we move to the competencies, it's a different story. We have five. So the first, and they, of course they relate. The first one is grasping the present. So that's understanding where you stand as an organization, as an individual, not just yourself, but also the environment. So that's where this 6M model is a very useful tool, because it helps you understand the present. Second, shape the future. You need to be able to kind of envision, imagine beyond today, like how should things be different in the future. Third, move the system. It's more like the change management and social change aspect. If you can't somehow change your own behavior, if you can't help others to change their behavior, nothing will happen. So that's also more on the implementation side.
Mhm.
Fourth, deliver, which is more the action planning, project management type of work. That's kind of the work typically, like when people talk about implementation and execution, that's what they talk about. And finally, adapt to change. So adapt to any changing circumstances. So if you have those competencies and understand a tool like the 6M model, which gives content to the meaning of what strategy is, with those two, I think you can really make a difference at every level in the organization.
How would you explain it to someone and take them through that journey to say, if you want to do this for your organization, these are some steps, these are some approaches, this is a framework that you've seen work?
The best thing is to focus on one of these competencies and just zoom in
Yeah.
on, because there's kind of sub competencies showing what it actually means. So, for instance, if we look at the first one, which is grasping the present, which includes, I think the very first is reflective awareness. So it immediately becomes personal, because what we see is so many assumptions, so many biases, so many blind spots where we assume we know what the world is about, we don't. So helping uh, employees, helping leaders develop this reflective awareness, being aware of their own biases and heuristics and blind spots. Second would be systems thinking, being able to see connections,
Yeah.
to know your place in the bigger system. And just frankly, if you look just at where the world is today, just these two are very critical, because knowing that you have your subjective viewpoint is not the only one, and there's errors in everyone's viewpoint, is critical. Systems thinking as well, seeing how all of us are related, how different parts of the globe are related, how different parts in the industry, how you're related to your customers, to your suppliers, to, and if you are working for a business unit, how you are related to other business units. So there's so many silos in organizations. So system thinking is so critical. The third one would be stakeholder insight, understand others, their interests, their stakes, their concerns. So really putting yourself in their perspectives. And the fourth one would be dynamic foresight, which means you're able to not to predict the future, because I don't know anything anyone can really predict unless in cases where it's least interesting, because in very stable, predictable environment, yeah, then you can just expand the past into the future. But in many other, I think in most industries and most regions, this is not possible. So dynamic foresight is getting sensitivity of some of the trends, some of the uncertainties, possible scenarios, like what could the future look like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10, maybe 20 years even, to get us to think about it and create that awareness. So that would be kind of a more in-depth, a deeper dive into kind of just this one competence of understanding.
For me, one of the things that struck me was reflective awareness. And
Mhm.
for reflective awareness, is there a technique that you could share with us that we could use or steal from you to help our leaders, our listeners go through understanding reflective awareness?
Yeah, I would say one approach would be to really proactively learn about other people's perspective, and especially people that you may not particularly like because they're too different. Like you're the other extreme. Like if you're very conservative, try to understand a very liberal, progressive person. And I don't want to make this political at all. That's not what I mean. But look into completely different parts of society. Look at completely different sectors. I think that's because I think the lack of reflective awareness is largely caused because we have our bubbles, our silos, our blind spots, because of where we were born, because of
Mhm.
the industry we are in, because of the job we are in. So we all have the industry bubbles, income bubbles, we have regional bubbles. And deliberately looking into other bubbles, I think, is a very important, and not it's not complicated because everything is there. You can, even with search engines, but especially with generative AI, you can just ask it to be the other side and kind of critique you. So have a dialogue with ChatGPT or any of the other tools, deliberately helping you to find out your blind spots.
Is there anything we need to talk about in terms of an organization building strategic competency?
Yeah, I've already mentioned it, but one thing that is so important, I think, is not reserving this for leaders or for the board. I think that's, I know I've been repeating this like 5 times already,
Very
but
valid.
that's kind of the main thing is, and the reason is for different reasons. One is for the people, because for them, I think every job changes very quickly. And there's all kind of research. Of course, AI has this huge impact on it, but there's other influences as well. So there's lots of reinvention of jobs going on. So if you are a responsible employer, you should help your employees think about their job, their department. So it's from a HR perspective, from a human perspective, from an employee perspective. That's very important to do, but also for an organizational perspective, because it's kind of odd if you think about it. I would think strategy is one of the most complex parts of an organization, and by definition of almost, because it is about everything. It's about integrating everything else. So it has to be. It's automatically pretty complex. And then the odd thing is, in the past and even the present, we make that the domain of just a few people in the organization. It's almost like an inverse relationship where the more complex, the fewer people should be involved. Which, if you really think about it, is a ridiculous idea, because the more complex things are, the more perspectives you need, the more input you need, the more different levels. So of course, and maybe that's a bit of an academic sidestep, but if you look in systems thinking, there's this idea of a requisite variety. So you need, in an organization, you need to have the variety to be able to match the variety around you. The same with complexity. If you are working in a very complex environment, you need this kind of requisite complexity in your organization
Right.
in order to be able to deal with it. And that means you actually need the full intellectual capacity of your people to be able to strategize sufficiently at a continuous.
So one of the posts that you made recently before we set up this podcast was about power skills, and I honestly that just lit me on fire, because the hard skills, the soft skills we've all heard about, but your take on power skills was
Mhm.
really novel. I find a lot of organizations, they have focused on hard skills, they may have come around to soft skills, But this whole area of strategy and these power skills, that was like a novel approach to me, because one of the biggest things I find when I'm talking with my clients, my students, is there's no clear strategy. There's no clear intent. I like open it up even
Mhm.
bigger than that they can see. And so this idea that there's both hard skills and soft skills that we've heard about and power skills, how can those power skills come into at the person at the individual contributor level, like
Mhm.
developing those and being able to apply them in the strategic areas?
Yes. So maybe first a little bit on the difference, because indeed hard skills and soft skills we've seen for a very long time. Hard skills being the technical skills, soft skills more the interpersonal, interrelational skills. I think over the past decade or two or so, soft skills have been emphasized a lot. So we do recognize the importance of all kind of soft skills, working with people, understanding, communication, empathy, and so on and so forth. But still, hard skills and soft skills both are still oriented at, let's say, today, doing today's work. They don't say anything about doing tomorrow's work. And that's where what we define as power skills is like, how do we step one step above and then say, okay, but we need to also think about, like, it's more like a meta skill. Is we need to think about what are our current skills? Are we good enough? How do we need to change? That's one difference. And I think the other, we also deliberately use power skills to say it's not a matter of more, because it's easy to add. Like if you look at the lists of skills of some of the competency frameworks, it just expands that 30 plus competencies, and we can probably list 50 of them or even 100. That's not necessarily helpful. So we try to focus on what are really the few core skills that we need in the future. And for instance, some of the work by the World Economic Forum recently, their report on, can't recall, but I think their projection of what are the skills needed for 2030. Of course, some of them are technical, clearly, there's no way around that. But the majority of them I would qualify as power skills or strategic skills. So all the things I've been saying so far. So these 5 skills: grasp the present, shape the future, move the system, deliver the results, and change the system, adapt to change. Those are the power skills, and the process of getting individuals to develop them is exactly I think the 3 steps that I also describe is first assess, so make sure there's an individual assessment. Do people have these skills? If you like, a 360 to make sure that it's not just you assessing the skill, but also like a handful of people around you. Um, and then, of course, develop, train, learn on the job with the various types of learning there are. You know as much about that as I do. And then the embedding. So change people's work. I think those, again, are the 3 steps we need in order to really have those power skills at the individual level. What it probably also means, we only have so much time and only have so much money. It probably means getting rid of some of the other stuff done, because just adding is not going to help. So it means for an organization also to reconsider their current HR policies, their leadership development programs, kind of critically look at those and see what can be taken out. Because again, simply adding more is not the solution, because people also need time to actually do their work.
Absorb and apply.
Yeah.
So you touched on one thing in those power skills, adaptability.
Hmm.
And that honestly fascinates me with the rise of AI and how fast it has come on. What I see in a lot of the ways that people are using AI is to automate a bunch of stuff. And I personally believe there's an awful lot of potential in using AI to augment the abilities of people. And that kind of speaks to adaptability. How do you see those two interplay as we look forward?
Yeah. Maybe one caveat is I would not call myself an expert in AI, not of any type. I'm a user, but there's far more advanced users than me, and builders as well. But I agree, and it's not even not just like one, but leverage, like improve what we do, and also make sure that all the stuff. This is my hope. It's more a hope, an ideal than maybe a reality. But use AI to take off anything that we don't have to do as a human being and can really focus on what makes us human. I think that's one of that is a big change, because it's kind of the next revolution. If you look at what the Industrial Revolution has done, it's kind of take over the manual part. Computers have taken over some of the, let's say, the cognitive work. Generative AI is also doing part of the creative work, the writing work. I think I use it myself as well. Like, what's the point in being able to summarize something if AI can do it? So there's other skills that as human beings we still have that can really get to the forefront. And also responding to the adaptability part, recently did a study amongst 1,200 professionals, US and UK, because they needed to be English speaking native, where we tested the 5 competencies that I've mentioned a couple of times now, and try to find out or research which of them has the biggest effect on career success. So, and we looked at subjective career success, like not how much money they make or what's their level, but how happy are they with their career. Like, there's a rich concept about what subjective career success means. And what we found was that of the 5, adaptability is clearly the most important. So being adaptable has most effect on subjective career success. Very clear outcome from the research. So the importance of this one power skill is kind of, we can't overestimate it.
So how can somebody tell if they're growing that skill or they're just coping with it?
Yeah, this is where and then I'm probably getting a bit into advertising mode now, just because it is exactly what we're doing. It's kind of, we build a self-assessment, validated it, so it's in terms of reliability, validity, all the scientific processes that you need in order to develop a scale and test it. Start with think one is the self-assessment. So we have these like any personality test, there's statements you indicate the extent to which you agree, and of course it's very easy to pretend you're great. So it's easy to all give, yeah, I'm great at this, but that's of course honestly using that assessment. And then the next thing I think would be the 360, because there's those are the kind of the simple ways to assess it, like a self-assessment and a 360. Anything else, if you truly want to test whether people have the competencies, it becomes a bit more complicated, because then you have to do it in their job, which everyone's job is unique. It's different. Every company is different. So then it becomes, I wouldn't say impossible, but truly objectively measuring their competence, that becomes at least very expensive and time consuming. But with the self-assessment and the 360, I think that those are very powerful ways of getting a good sense of where you stand, of your weaknesses, of your strengths, the points you need to develop. And that applies to adaptability and also any of the other 4 competencies.
So what are some obstacles that prevent organizations from moving forward in these directions that we've been talking about here?
Oh, yes. Common sense. Maybe not common sense, but kind of dogma. It's dogma. And I think that has been the problem in strategy for decades. Like, if we look at the current strategy textbooks, including some of the most used and the best-selling textbooks, if you look in there, they're not that different from like 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. They're basically a catalog of frameworks where every now and then a new framework is added, so they become thicker, there's more cases, so there's even, like, it's not 300, but now there's 700 pages. And there's an interesting article in Long Range Planning from 1984. Remember the title? It's by Wareham and a few others, I think, where they reflect on what they call the traditional approach to strategy. And that's kind of what I call the mission, vision, SWOT paradigm. You have your mission, your goals, then you do your SWOT, and then that creates alternatives. You select and execute and so on. 84, in that article, that's called traditional and even distorted. And if you now look if I talk to some students who have followed a strategy course, that's kind of still what they come up with. So there's such a strong dogma that strategy needs a SWOT. Strategy needs mission, vision, values. Strategy needs an offsite, needs brown paper sessions. And it's like a rain dance, because we still accept those failure rates, but we nevertheless go on doing the same ritual. So I think that kind of the mindset the dogmatic mindset and belief in those myths. I think that's the biggest problem strategy has had for decades and still has.
So that's from a creation side. What about the execution side? You
Mhm.
mentioned the seven deadly sins of execution. So what are some failures that you can highlight there?
Good. Yeah, one of the good things is over the last 5 to 10 years, finally execution has really gotten some more attention. Even also by the big consultancy firms. If you look at their services, strategy implementation or execution is part of that now, which wasn't the case or barely the case before. So the great thing is it's actually finally getting some of the attention it needed, which was long due. You refer to the seven deadly sins. One of them is, and this is, by the way, taken from, it's not even my own. I called it the seven deadly sins, but the seven are actually from one of the textbooks, Johnson, Scholes, and Whittington, Exploring Strategy, I think it was called. Some kind of one page in the back of the book. Death by planning is one of them. Really overemphasis on getting the plan, and then everyone is so sick and tired, and all the money is gone, all the time is gone. Then it's still you just shout, now we need to execute, and then assume things are going automatically, which is not, of course, not the case. I won't go through all seven of them.
Mm-hmm.
But and another one which relates very closely to a lot of the things I've been already talking about is disconnectedness, which means based on the board's reality, uh, which is an ivory tower reality, and it has to be. And even if you can assume and you could pretend as an executive that you know what's going on in your organization, but you can't. You have your job. You have to be high level. You have to look at the big picture, because otherwise you get a very toxic micromanager who gets in the way of everything else. So you need other realities. The shop floor reality. You need the mid management reality. You need the marketing reality, the purchasing reality. So the disconnected between the boardroom reality and the day-to-day reality of employees, but also customers, is another big one. Maybe a last one is misreading resistance, because this is a big word, of course, in any change management. There's resistance. Huh? We have a strategy, and now people resist to implement it. I think that's rarely true, because resistance has it in it that people deliberately don't want to implement. I think that's rarely the case. It's not resistant. It's mostly, I think, lack of clarity on the development side. So interestingly for me, a lot of the problems in execution start in the development. Is we create these kind of high level, nice sounding, impressive strategy documents, but when you actually read them, I'm often left wondering, okay, sounds all great, looks fantastic, but what's the difference? What do we need to do? How is this going to change us? So I think that's what's happening with a lot of the resistance, is the lack of clarity on what is the change, what is the new strategy. If it's just a bunch of ambitious objective, that's not a strategy. So those are some of the deadly sins of strategy and execution.
Have you, with one of your clients, experienced this? And when that happened, how did you help them? Is there a technique or two that you could share with our audience on how to help them with execution?
Maybe focus on the last one, the misreading of resistance. Is I've had a client where during the development process, so I always have a very participative approach, where I try to get people from all over the company in the room. Usually that works. In this particular case, it did not work, because this was a company where historically it was a small company with the entrepreneur, the founder, still being the CEO, having such good comprehensive views on where to take the company that it became a bit artificial to include everyone in the process. So we went into this very participative process, had the first two sessions with the team, and then I kind of noticed that they started resisting. It's kind of okay. They were still polite, so they gave answers to my question, but you can see when people are not really engaged, when they're not really contributing. So then I kind of stopped the meeting and kind of stepped back and said, okay, what's going on? I can see you don't like what's going on, or you don't feel comfortable or whatever. So let's talk about this. And that's the point where they actually said, like, we'd rather have our founder or our CEO take the first, let's say, create the first draft with you, and then we can comment, because we feel we're constantly kind of second guessing what the entrepreneur would think. And for this particular company, I think there was a very good intervention where we changed the process. I started working one-on-one with the entrepreneur, and then later on involved the rest of the team again. So just to highlight that it's really about listening very carefully. So one of the skills as a consultant, but also as an educator, and also as an executive and manager, a leader, it's listening. Listening meaning observing, seeing, hearing, and honestly trying to figure out what people are worried about. What are they thinking? What are they doing? What are they struggling with? And I think when you do that, I think then resistance become. And if you face resistance, you also look at it very differently. You look at it as a sign of commitment. Because I've said this at other places as well. But what happens if there's no resistance? If you have a big change, if your new strategy is pretty big a change compared to where you are now, if you get no resistance, that would be kind of my horror scenario, because then everyone is probably very disengaged and not even interested, not even taking the effort to resist. So seeing resistance as a for what it is, I think a sign of commitment and a sign of people struggling, and then listen very carefully what they struggle with and what they want.
So, the story you gave us about this entrepreneur is very close to my heart, because I feel that with my team. They're always second guessing what's going on in my brain. What advice would you give such an entrepreneur? Because at that point, the entrepreneur is that single point of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And you want this company to grow, you want this company to expand, and you want the team members to feel that they contributed.
Yeah, part of it is of course creating this kind of safe space in the sessions, but that's what I do all the time, and that's what I did also with this entrepreneur. So that was clearly not enough. So it's a necessity, but not sufficient. In this case, I think the solution was not ideal, but we had to be pragmatic. Of course, there was a project, there was a deadline, that's the way it goes. So we had to be pragmatic and say, okay, in this case, I'll work with the entrepreneur and then involve the group later on to get their feedback and so on. So that was kind of the second best solution. The long-term ideal solution, and then I'm again back at the competencies. One of the reasons these people felt they were second guessing is they felt less competent than the entrepreneur, and they probably were less competent in terms of strategic thinking, because they have never had the training and not even the practice of applying it in their own work. So that's it again where this whole process of a SaaS develop embed comes in. Is if you want your people to contribute to conversations like this, you need to help them. You need to help them develop the competencies, because you can't expect people to talk about stuff they don't know about, they don't feel comfortable about. So if you work with your team, you need to help them a little bit. Okay, to give them the confidence that they actually can think strategically. And my optimistic belief is that I think many people are much better at strategic thinking and strategic behavior than they think, because they assume this is kind of somewhere higher up the organization, this kind of mystical boardroom thing, literally kind of mystical, and it's kept mystical because it has to be kind of vague and for the boardroom. While my own experience with lots of companies is that two ways. One, unfortunately, that's not true. Also, at the boardroom level, it's often not there or not sufficiently there. And at the lower levels, it can be quite well developed. There may be people who can do this quite well. So the idea that strategic competency is related to the level, the hierarchical level, I think that's a mistake. Of course, we hope some more competence at that level, at the higher levels. And probably there will be a little because they have more experience and they need to do it. But it needs to be developed, I think, at all levels to really get your company, avoid all these sins, these mistakes, and finally get an improved success rate in strategy.
That's a really interesting point. I can recall from years ago coming across some material that said that truck drivers have to have a very strategic thinking because they have to anticipate what the traffic is doing to drive safely. And that kind of spurs a question for me. For people that are listening to this that are inspired to start building their own competency, no matter what their level is in the organization, what's something they can do this week that would start to move the needle over time?
Yeah, if I go back again to these 5 competencies, the first one is grasp the present, is go and read about, if you are a truck driver or any other job, start reading a bit like where's the industry moving? What are the new developments? To get a sense of how your job could look like a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And I think in that way, it becomes also something less threatening because, of course, there's real examples now of self-driving trucks. Still, kind of legally, that's still a bit of an issue with who is accountable if something terrible happens. But the technology is there. So what does it mean? And that's for truck drivers, but also for many other jobs. And rather than seeing it as a threat, it's like take ownership and go and look like how is your job affected, and what can you do to prepare to still be relevant if that change is happening. I think that's to start reading about the development of your job. I think that's the one thing I would start with now.
There's, of course, we could spend another few hours, but I'm also cognizant of your time. I really want to thank you for your time and this opportunity that you gave us at a short notice. I definitely think there's a lot here that we would like to learn from you.
Yeah, this has been a terrific amplifier for the stuff that I've been picking up off of your LinkedIn feed. It's been eye-opening for me for a couple of the articles that I've gone through. When I came across them, I turned to Anil and it's like, oh my gosh, we've got to have this guy on the podcast. This is just right up the alley of the people that we deal with that is relevant to them.
Yeah, glad to hear. So happy to have this conversation and hopefully have inspired some other people as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Ever felt like your product backlog was overflowing? Stakeholders were pulling you in different directions, and the development team was skeptical about this thing called Scrum and Agile. Here's the thing: market conditions changing all the time, technology is changing all the time, and customer needs are changing all the time. Companies don't just need product owners and Scrum masters who create specs or run meetings. They need visionaries who understand customer value, focus on outcomes instead of outputs, and can guide teams to deliver it rapidly and consistently. The question is, how do you become that product owner or Scrum Master? This is where I like to introduce you to Concepts and Beyond's Scrum Alliance certification courses. It really transforms the approach to product management and Agile. Concepts and Beyond delivers Scrum Alliance certification courses that grow the Scrum Master and product owner. These courses are about mastering the mindset that deliver product innovation and team performance. What makes these courses different? Instead of theoretical lectures, we use brain science principles to make learning stick. Our trainers focus on practical skills you can apply in your next sprint. Imagine coming back to work with the confidence to prioritize your backlogs effectively, the skills to collaborate with developers meaningfully, and the know how to deliver products that customers actually love. The product owner journey starts with the CSPO, which is a 101 level course that has no prerequisite. If you have work experience, I would suggest taking the ACSPO course to become a practitioner. If you like to advance beyond that, take the CSPPO course that focuses on you becoming a master practitioner. The Scrum Master journey starts with the CSM, which is again a 101 level course that has no prerequisites. If you have work experience, I would highly recommend you take the ACSM to become a practitioner. And if you like to advance beyond that, take the Certified Scrum Professional Scrum Master, CSPSM, that focuses you on becoming a master practitioner. And if you're a leader leading your team and your organizations, then consider taking the Certified Agile Leadership Workshop. This class prepares you to manage the dramatic change we have been experiencing and lead yourself, your team, and your organization effectively. Here's what you get: interactive sessions using innovation games that unlock product creativity, real world scenarios that mirror your daily product challenges,
practical tools for backlog management and stakeholder communication, and a supportive community of product professionals and Scrum professionals. Our trainers become your guides on your side in your agile journey. The best part, our in person and virtual courses fit into your busy schedule with cohort style learning that gives you time to practice between sessions. Visit conceptsandbeyond.com or scan this QR code and discover how your certification courses can transform your approach to product management and agile adoption.